Kenya's Finance Ministry now has the legal mandate to draw up regulations designed to tax e-commerce transactions. So changes to its Income Tax Act, which were approved by the President last week, are essentially behind this change. It defines the digital marketplace as a platform that enables the direct interaction between buyers and sellers of goods and services through electronic means. It's a very broad definition, and at face value, the change allows the state to now try and grab a share of any transactions persons resident in Kenya do with international firms as diverse as eBay, Amazon, Netflix, Facebook, you name it. Now, in June, the now suspended finance minister argued that this was all about what he perceived as lost revenue. The changes he proposed, he said, quote, has led to the erosion of our tax base, hence low tax revenue, since the existing system, he says, is not equipped to deal with these challenges, end of quote. Now, at this point, the precise regulations on who would be targeted, what the revenue threshold would be, how these transactions will be tracked and taxes assessed, all of those decisions are yet to be made. But as a rough point of comparison, consider the fact that there were mobile commerce transactions worth $19 billion in Kenya just in the second quarter of the year. So then, where does this leave the country's e-commerce ambitions? I explored that a little earlier with the chairman of CIO East Africa.
Actually, the policy regime is very confusing for actually the practitioners. Because yes, you're supporting the sector on one hand and killing it on the other. So it doesn't really make sense. And I think some of these policies are driven not from the industry perspective in terms of growing the industry, but mostly for revenue collection, so to speak. So Hare needs to collect X amount of money, and therefore, which other area do we need to tax so that we can shore up these numbers?
The finance minister had made his intent clear. He's now the suspended finance minister. But back in June, he'd made his intent pretty clear. He'd said, in saying that, look, as far as I'm concerned, I see digital platforms as essentially an item that erodes the Kenyan tax base. That's roughly a paraphrase of what essentially he said. Was there any lobbying done to try and get that off the proposed finance bill?
I think there's been, KEPSA has been at the forefront of this, and they've been engaging different organizations of government. But I think that to me sounds like a defeatist approach, because e-commerce has not even started in this country. E-commerce will only start happening when we have, for instance, proper addressing systems. Right now, we're really, it's Band-Aid. E-commerce. You're using the infrastructure that is available to deliver a service, but it's very inefficient. Yeah. Now, when we get proper addressing, then you will start seeing e-commerce happening in this country. And if you look at the volume that can move with e-commerce, I don't think you will say this is eroding the tax base. You will actually, Hare will actually collect serious money out of that. But you have to let this sector grow.
But isn't this, especially the way the amendment was written into the income tax law, because of the way the digital marketplace was defined? I mean, it's such a broad statement, because it just basically says a place where buyers and sellers essentially arrive to trade goods and services online. So by definition, it also implies that if you're having to pay for your Netflix subscription because you're paying for a service, that they want a cut of that. If you're buying something from Amazon, they want a cut of that.
Not just Amazon, even Facebook. You know, the way people, the small traders are trading on Facebook, you're buying something for 500 bob or 250 shillings, it means you are in that bracket. So even I think that's why our constitution actually clearly stated that some of these things need to be put to the stakeholders so that you can discuss these things. Because I don't think Hare have a clear view of what e-commerce can do. Because they're not they're experts in tax collection, but they're not experts in IT. Yeah. So I think they need to come back to the sector, have a tete-a-tete with the sector, and the sector will actually help them define some of the areas where they can generate a serious revenue.
But is this, I mean, just from a pure technical perspective, because as I understand it, if you're going to try and figure out what I am spending on, right, if I'm paying for Netflix or for data subscription or storage subscription rather, for Google and so on and so forth, my ISP might know where my traffic is going.
That's true.
But Hare does not have a legal right to have access to that information. So isn't this, from a technical perspective, dead on arrival?
You see, it could be. It could be dead on arrival, but it could also be forced. Because you see, some of these things, when you're talking about revenue collection by government, then there's some clauses which, can compel whatever ISP or whatever service provider to actually provide that number or provide that information. So it could be forced.
But I mean, we'd still come back to what happened in Uganda
Yeah.
last year when they introduced a social media tax, right? People just went back to using VPNs. Yes, we'd trade
yes.
slower traffic for not paying the
Yeah,
tax, which is likely to happen in this case.
There's a lot of ways in which people can evade it. There are many, but do you want to go that direction, as opposed to actually creating an environment where people feel safe, where people feel happy to actually pay taxes,